riding a roller coaster, but you're driving it yourself. I don't know how else to put it. It's crazy.
They got problems on problems on problems on problems on problems on problems I solve them. I run through the money, the pressure be calling. Left on my blessings, I feel like I'm falling. The birdie is back, tell me I'm garbage. I'm going through something, that's why I ain't calling. Phone and progression, it's all that I wanted. The foe and affection, I summon it down. Because they got problems on problems on problems on problems on problems on problems I solve them. I run through the money, the pressure be calling. Left on my blessings, I feel like I'm falling. The birdie is back, tell me I'm garbage. I'm going through something, that's why I ain't calling. Phone and progression, it's all that I wanted. The foe and affection, I summon it.
Hello, hello. Looks like everyone's popping in. All right, welcome to the mid-virtual Race Day 2020 alumni and students panel, brought to you by the BAA. I'm your host, Jeremy Tuttle. Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got everybody. That was quick. Perfect. So we've got a wide range of alumni here today, from many decades. I'll let them introduce themselves, but before we do that, at any point in time during this panel discussion, if you want to submit a question for me or any of the panelists, just pop it in. If you're on Zoom, down at the bottom there in the Q&A section, or if you are on the Discord, which is at cmubuggy.org/chat, you can just pop it in there, and those will all get filtered over to me. So why don't we start with Brian, and we'll just move along. Everyone introduce yourselves, talk about what team you were on, when, and just a little intro.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, I'm Brian Furman. I graduated in '79. I was on the ATO team from '76 through '79. And in ATO, my role was as a gopher, early years in engineer, and then buggy chairman my senior year. The history of ATO, at the time I was there, we were sort of on the downswing in our buggy program. My senior year, we took a 5th, which was I think the last time we placed in the top 6. And but it was a great time. Looking back, a lot of wonderment at today's technology versus what we were doing 40 years ago. So thanks, Jeremy.
Sherry?
Hi, I'm Sherry Heim. My real name's Charlotte, but my childhood name is Sherry, and that was my buggy name, so that's who I am today. I was a 1983 graduate, and I was the driver for CIA in 1980 for women's, driving Synergy, and I drove Black Magic in 1981. It was a wonderful group of, a wonderful eclectic group of pushers and designers and engineers. It was a great time.
Awesome. McHugh?
Hi, so I'm Adam McHugh. I was in KDR, which no longer exists, but I was KDR's chair in 2005, sort of a local maxima for us in terms of performance. After that, I was safety chair in '06 and head judge in '07. And I'm a little bit, I think I'm a little bit of like the Ja Rule of buggy in that I haven't truly been relevant since 2007, but I keep getting asked to appear and give commentary and my opinion on things, which I'm happy to do.
We just always know you'll say yes.
Yeah, I'm in.
Sabrina?
Hi, I'm Sabrina. I'm a current student. I'm a current senior in CIA. I started out in CIA as the social chair, and then I moved on to chairman last year. Currently, I am the sweepstakes design comp chair. Primarily what I did in buggy, aside from like leadership things, was mechanic. I pushed a couple of times on Raceday. Yep.
Awesome. And Jake?
Hey, I'm Jake. I'm also a current senior. I'll be graduating in a couple weeks. I'm currently the sweepstakes assistant chairman, but I started out as a part of SIGEP, and I was a pusher and then a assistant mechanic, before head mechanic and then chairman, and now I'm on sweepstakes.
Cool. Miku's already whipping out his props, so I'm gonna.
I feel like we have like a low key. If you have like a trophy just sort of casually like in there in the background, I feel like I get to just like whip out random.
All right. To be fair, it's only second place, so.
yeah. Everybody has some. I have a poster. We can do a show and tell. It'll be great.
So actually, speaking of wheels, I would like to ask Brian, because when we were talking before before we got this panel set up, one of the things that you mentioned, Brian, was the golds, the wheels that maybe carried ATO through their glory days. Tell me your experiences with those.
So somehow in early in ATO's glory days, at least the legend that was passed on to me was we stumbled upon that a certain couple of years of soapbox derby tires made, I guess probably in the early 50s, had a different compound than before and after. And the compound of those tires, which we ended up calling the golds, was such that similar to some of today's, you heat them up and they just roll fantastically. So that gave ATO about a 10-year edge. That was probably the best buggy secret that the ATO house had, was to find, go to soapbox derby races and buy old tires, old soapbox derby wheels from kids and their parents, and that eventually our inventory of those became unusable. We couldn't find any more. We moved to trying to reinvent that compound, and through a number of years, we were never really able to get it just right. And we experimented with other compounds and enjoyed the inhaling benefits of hexane. So that's some stories about tires and wheels. And you look at today's technology, and I think the diameter of soapbox derby wheels were probably about 3 times what wheels are today.
Adam, of course, with the props.
I wanted to riff on it for a second, because I actually have, it's a repainted gold tire from 1947 for soapbox derby. It's not the original rubber, but it is, it was repainted, and you can see there's like little holes and stuff to balance it. But this is one of the original tires that you're referring to back in the day, and sort of like has like made its way down to whatever. But I think if we're going to do show and tell, I might as well bring that out.
Thanks,
at that moment.
Adam.
Yeah.
We can go running with tires here. What do you got?
You really want to do this? Because I
do it.
Okay. No, I have like, well, no, maybe not all of them, but I will do a comparison of, because I'm not supposed to have all of them, but I will do a comparison between like this is like a modern, it's a better example. This is like a modern something that you'd see on like a fringe, and this is like the 1947 version, and this is probably like 1/8 the weight of this, and significantly more performant. And there's smaller ones over here, but that form factor has been the case since, I think, popularized in 2001 when Fringe won with Brazen.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Jake, actually, your introduction into the mechanic side of buggy kind of started with a wheel-related thing, right?
Yeah, I was a freshman, and it was the spring semester, and the head mechanic and the chairman were having a conversation about different bearings and certain lubricant types, and wheel durometer, which is the hardness of the urethane. And I had some experience back in high school doing a little bit of that with racing longboards and certain competition in that style. And so I just, lent an ear, kind of eavesdropped, put in a quick 2 cents and thought that was the end of it. And they said, oh, do you have a quick minute to, later in the week to go over different bearing combos or different lubricant types or washing styles and stuff. And I was like, oh, thinking it was just about like an hour's time commitment. And then apparently, what I thought was an hour's time commitment to them meant, oh no, we want you now in the truck, up at 4 a.m. with us, through truck weekend and race day. And, 4 years later, here I am on sweepstakes.
Yeah, it literally becomes your career without you necessarily realizing it.
So from a driver's perspective, the wheels or magic were so close to my legs and they were hot. They were, I think, solid milled aluminum with a 1/4 inch of padding. So it made for a pretty bumpy ride. But they were also like right next to me. So I used to cover my legs in duct tape. So somehow that was thought of as a heat barrier. I don't know why. Fortunately, they never got hot enough to melt it onto my legs, but it was pretty close.
That's good enough, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny too. I don't know if we can pull it up, but you have a picture, Sherry, from back when you were driving in the 80s. I mean, your helmet basically looks like it's a head-shaped tin can.
It was a hockey helmet. And I wore a mouth guard. What that would have done, I don't know.
Oh, mouth guards are good.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty interesting because they weren't mandatory then, right? They were like made pre-mandatory around 2012, I believe.
The mouth guards?
Yeah. They for a long time. Yeah. I think it was just uneven coverage.
Yeah, a lot of the safety rules came about in the late 80s, right? Mid to late 80s.
Well, mouth guards wasn't among them. Mouth guards were reintroduced in 2010 or 12.
Right. But like the helmets too. I know like late 80s, a lot of buggies sort of had to be retrofitted to fit a much bigger head space.
Yeah.
It's actually a good amount of detail of that in multiple episodes of the Shoot the Shit podcast. Just to plug that there. So moving on from that. Sorry, I just lost my notes here. Let's see. Okay, yeah, here we go. So, Sherry, while we're, talking about your experiences, tell us more about your experiences as a driver, because I think you had an interesting story about a lane 2 or a hill 2 incident during your race in 81.
Right. So we were rained out, and we had to wait a whole week to race. And we just did one go, if I recall correctly. And I was pushed off at the top of Hill 2. Our Hill 2 pusher was Joe Goldcamp, and I think he was also the quarterback of the football team. He was a big guy. So I was going pretty fast, and you cross over to the right on the curb, and I had a specific lane that I followed, and there was someone in exactly where I wanted to be, crouched down taking a photo, and I thought, I'm not moving. This is where I need to be, and I just pointed toward his feet. And later on, my roommate heard the person talking about that crazy guy who was driving Black Magic. He almost ran me over. So I was glad that I didn't change my lane, and he eventually moved.
Yeah. Now, were you actually, because as you mentioned there, the person thought that it was a man driving. I think you were the first female driver to win, weren't you?
I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time with a great team.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And the first independent win too, right? First non-group team.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the racing culture like in your time?
Well, it was very competitive and secretive. I have to say, like, for me to talk about the Wheels of Magic still gives me a bit of pause that I might be sharing some secret. And even posting that old on social media, an old picture of me in Synergy, which was a 1970s Bucky. I thought, should I do this? Because it was very secretive. But then there was also, it was a kind of a club, particularly the drivers. And at that point, it was a mix of women and men. Very competitive, though. Lots of secret elixirs, secret, if you had a certain adhesive, you didn't share it with the other teams.
Mm-hmm. Brian, with your, sorry, go on.
It's less competitive now.
I don't know about that.
Don't tell Jeremy, it'll go to his head. But I think after like the top one or top two, yeah, certainly it's like dropped off. I think there was a recent year when it was like SEC got their requisite 204, and then I think second place was like a 212. 2014, I think might have been the year. A lot of DQs, but I think there's rivalries, but maybe in terms of like a straight crowding for first place. My understanding is that happens rarely, right? There's like a couple transitions between dynasties where you get like some really heavy rivalry, but usually it's fairly dynastic, fairly stratified.
I think Sabrina and Jake could probably talk a bit about the competitive culture as it is right now. It's a little more friendly, as I understand it, right?
Oh yeah, it's super. They're the coolest people ever. Like this year's chairman are all best friends. Like when did that happen? When I was an undergrad, it was not quite like that. But then I was on a Zoom call the other day with like every current chairman. They just did a podcast together. Like, are they gonna like make a band? I don't know. They're amazing together. So yeah, I'd like to hear a lot more about that.
Yeah, I think the current atmosphere definitely sounds like a little bit less competitive, or in that, like, I don't think it's less competitive in that everyone is still like trying very hard to win. And there are certain secrets that they're like, I definitely not going to tell you this. But I think the atmosphere is definitely a lot more of like camaraderie. Everyone is in this together. Like we're all doing buggy. So I find that there's a lot more, at least like recently I've seen a lot more like inter-team collaboration, teams trying to like work together. And as you said, like a lot of the current chairmen are all like friends with each other. So I think people are trying to be like very friendly with each other, and I quite like it. I think it lends well to the spirit of buggy, in that like buggy is such this like amazing thing that we're all doing together. But while like people are still keeping this idea of like, yeah, we are competing at the end of the year.
Another thing to keep in mind is that we really only this year got a fall semester. So there wasn't much of a chance for tensions to kind of rise amongst teams as you get ready for, race day and stuff like that. In addition, with the this year supposed to be the 100th anniversary, it was all about the community. There was a whole lot more effort that was going into it. We had a couple of brand new teams that were on the course. And so a lot of their needs for direction or maybe donation of tools or like mechanic help and knowledge. So there was a lot more opportunity for kind of collaboration and support, and it was just a generally different atmosphere.
I think Apex might have, in some ways, led the way in cracking that egg open, right, with their open source buggy. And even when I was a student back in the late 2000s, like 07 to 2010, I feel like SIGEP was pretty open, and it was kind of weird at the time. Everyone was like, "What are they doing? Like, you're not supposed to talk about this stuff." But it's sort of becoming more commonplace. It does feel like it's good for the sport and for its longevity.
There were a couple like weird overlaps like that. Like I think at one year like Fringe got beta pushers and beta just like didn't do buggy as a result of that. There were a couple. I always find it. I think my like undergraduate career was like the iPhone came out the year after I graduated, and as soon as that happened, it was like there are way fewer secrets than there previously were. Right? It was like the end of the Zooter era and the invention of social media and like mobile phones that are good was just changed like everything about how like teams handled secrecy, and nobody was like a great IT back then, so that was like a watershed moment, I think.
I can attest that it was the opposite back in the late 70s. The competition was intense. The secrecy was intense. There would be, people that would try to get a glimpse inside somebody else's truck. Would be, we had bouncers. We escort them away. You're not wanted here. It was pretty intense, and there was between some of the teams. So, for example, ATO, our top competition back then was Pica, Beta, and Sigma Nu. CIA was up and coming. We were worried about them. we knew they were. We knew they were going to get there. But the competition between the houses and the competition for getting talent into the houses, the competition for getting drivers, just all around, as well as the technology and the secrecy was, it was like we were countries in competition with each other for world dominance.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that feeling. When my team was really coming up, 2008, 2009, sort of that big like Pica SDC rivalry. Pica was scary. And it wasn't just like, oh, they're fast. It's just like the demeanor, like the way they conducted themselves. It was sort of, it was militaristic. It was quite the aggressive competitive atmosphere.
Which is an interesting thing to hear from like an SDC person 8 years out from when they started winning, right? Because I think that's probably been the case. There's always been like one org like that for forever, right? Currently it's SDC, whether you realize it or not. But previously it was like Pica, and then I'm sure like Spirit was like that, prior to that, CIA, ATO.
Mm-hmm.
That's
sort of like
always an interesting thing.
Like the New England Patriots, maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna make that analogy. I don't know how many.
Yeah,
all Steelers fans, right? So.
From time to time. But I don't think there's nearly as much bad blood anymore, and that a lot of that disappeared sort of in the late 2000s, which is great. That being said, I can kind of flip it on its head with our first audience question, and whoever wants to take this can. What was the biggest drama or scandal during your time participating in Buggy?
One thing that during my time, I think it was probably either 77 or 78. On the preliminary day, I believe it was. This was where some houses were heating their tires. That was their technology. Well, we all heated them in different ways, but Beta had an oven basically an oven, I believe, that they heated their buggy in, and it was too hot for their driver to get in it when they had to bring it out to the starting line. And finally they got the driver in it, but it was also too hot for the carriers to carry it out to the starting line, and they dropped the buggy coming out to the starting line. So that was, and so they didn't have a really good day that day.
Those were pretty heavy buggies back then too.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen that sort of thing happen more than once. We can all probably identify it when you see it. It's like less than a minute to a heat. There's a team that's missing, and you're like, where are they? And then all of a sudden you see them sort of scrambling out of the truck, carrying the buggy like foot over foot, and it's like, somebody's about to trip. It's like sort of like a disaster in slow motion. I feel like every year or two somebody ends up doing that. It's just.
Yeah, like the 5 seconds before is like it's not like a guideline, right? You can like build in a little bit more margin of error before your start than 6 seconds. I think is you're not going to get the wheels like that much hotter at that point.
Right.
Just so the stories that stand out for me are from the perspective of the driver, and I'm sure there was some espionage regarding technology, but I probably wasn't a part of that. But I was one of the first in a crew of there was a mix of men and women drivers, and the fraternities were just starting to use women drivers, and one of the drivers didn't make it around the bend on free roll, and the controversy of causing that buggy to be picked up and put into an ambulance. I think that the policy was that they would not take you out, and that I don't think the emergency room crew were real careful about shells and things like that. So, you know, the fear, the controversy of causing damage as one of the early unproven female drivers it was a worry. It's certainly from my perspective.
Yeah, you don't want to build that narrative around yourself. It's a lot of
Correct.
pressure.
Yeah.
Jake, Sabrina, any scandals? Come on, you guys are too wholesome.
Yeah, let's see.
The one that pops into my head over the last couple years has just been roster issues. There have been a lot of like arguments and debate going back and forth about different fraternities using the pledging system and how they can add people to a pledge roster without having them actually be a part of the organization, and thus those pushers can be considered, those guys can be considered a part of their organization, so they can push as per the sweepstakes bylaws without actually being a part of the organization. And it all kind of comes into play with how that compares to different, it's mostly a fraternity issue with different membership rules or standards for the different houses. But the ones off the top of my head have been roster issues.
Does that come into play a lot right now, that, you know, given that there are no fraternities? Like, I mean, there are fraternities, but like it's not like the heyday, and so I'd imagine generally like membership rules are more relaxed than they were.
So it entirely depends. I mean, realistically, there's only a handful of fraternities that are still competitive. Yeah. And the one that's on top of my head is obviously I'm a part of SIGEP, but the comparison is to Pike. Pike has a pledging system, and they can put someone on their roster who has like has a pledge, who might not actually be a part of their chapter, but can still participate on their push team. Whereas SIGEP doesn't have a pledging system, and so all of our pushers are full brothers who participate in booth and Greek sing and the other activities of the fraternity, and not just the buggy side.
Yeah, it's kind of like an interesting aspect to SIGEP at Carnegie Mellon. But I mean, I was there when there was a rule written about how late you could put like an independent pusher on your roster, and the thought was that like it gave independent organizations an unfair advantage. So I think that there's some sort of buffer currently beforehand. But I remember being in that meeting, and Tom Pfister from Beta was like, yeah, but like frats win every year, so like despite this handicap, because at that point Pica was in the middle of their 8-year run. It was an interesting role to have at that point. It's interesting to hear that like roster stuff still comes up despite kind of one of the best fraternities, SIGEP, not having a pledging process. Pica being happy to make the pledging process it strikes me as weird to hear about Pikes taking advantage of the pledging process to get better pushers, because that would have seemed like unconscionable to the Pica that I knew back in the day. And
yeah, it's interesting that fraternities still end up dealing with this, especially since independent organizations can really just kind of grab whoever. There is like a preliminary roster and then a final roster system that teams have to submit and get approved. But for that preliminary roster, you can put like literally anyone on it. So yeah, certain organizations might be at a bit of a disadvantage. Personally, I preferred it. It meant I was pushing with my brothers and my friends, and not just some guy from, a different part of campus who was fast. But it definitely does tend to put at least another loophole or another obstacle for us to try and jump over.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that at this point that puts Greek organizations at a disadvantage?
Yeah, I'd say.
I think the Greek system might be facing a couple other hurdles.
Yeah, I mean that's
your recruitment for sweepstakes, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because the theory back in the day, and Brian, I'm sure you could speak to this. Greeks could basically force people to show up if they needed manpower, and independents would have a much harder time convincing people to wake up in the morning and get out there for rolls.
I think that's like I don't mean to keep remembering, but I think that's like a uniquely independent organization view on the situation. Like having been a chairman of a Greek org, it's, pledges are not the single most reliable set of people. Like, you'd be surprised. Like we couldn't really force anybody to do anything, but
that actually reminds me of a story. I think it was Signu. I might be wrong though. Anyway, some fraternity was charged with sweeping like Hill 3 and 4, and they had some specific pledges that they assigned to do it, and the fee for not doing that was like $20 or $30 per day of rolls. And every morning, basically, the pledge would wake up, go to the chairman, like slide $30 under his door, and go back to sleep.
Yeah. You could have like one additional wheel or not do any of the chores for the entire semester.
Yeah.
that still absolutely comes into play, and the whole idea about I don't know what it was back when some of the other panelists were racing, but certainly now in the last couple of years, the fraternity teams have been the attended teams during practice rolls throughout. I mean, we're talking like single digit numbers compared to some independent organizations who might show up with 20 or 30 people to help them run rolls.
I think it was opposite in the early 80s. We were scraping to put together a team, and also I think there was less funding for CIA too. That was an issue.
Yeah, ATO, we would get about 20, 25 brothers out for practice rolls and everything. It would be, it'd also be easy to go around and get people up, because you just get a few dedicated guys up and you just go start banging on doors in the house. and then, and you have to do a couple of cycles for actually getting people out of bed and dragging them, but eventually everybody gets the message.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a total contrast to like right now, where CIA will have 30-something people out, and we'll be like, where is everyone? We need more people to roll. And then you have like teams out there. I remember one day, like I think Jake, you were there, like SIGUP had 3 people out, and one of them was their driver. And I was like, if they can do rolls with 3 people, like we've got 30, we'll figure something out.
A couple of years that I was the head mechanic and then the chairman, I'd load 3 drivers and then get up and book it down to Hill 3 and push 3, 4, and 5 just to get our drivers around the course so we can make sure we're qualified on race day.
Yeah. There's actually a little discussion here in the Q&A section. Somebody basically brought up this exact thing we're talking about, where independents can get anyone to show up, and fraternities and sororities need people who have already agreed to be members for life, essentially, right? Because that's sort of the pledge you take when you go Greek. And the discussion around like the difference in those restrictions has come up many times over the years, and the general consensus seems to be that independents are kind of okay generally with some sort of change there, but the Greeks have time and again said they really just want to be doing this with their brothers or their sisters, because it's sort of that organizational bonding experience, that fraternal bonding experience.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, I think from the Greek side, it's part of the culture, it's part of the package, like everything else, is being part of that organization. And it's part of organizational pride.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, what's what's a win if you have half the people on the team aren't actually your brothers? Like it's where's the organizational commitment if you're not really committed? So
I think that's an interesting thing about people who are good at buggy in general, is that they're good at buggy, right? It's like very, very difficult to get mercenaries. Like every time I've seen it where people try to get ringers, or people try to get people at grade of the semester, or like recruiting from a different team or whatever, it never really works out, right? Like the people who are the best at buggy are the people who are the best at buggy, and I think the fraternity system tends to in aggregate produce more cohesive teams, or at least used to. I mean, now fraternities aren't as present, but I don't know, that's just my take on it.
Absolutely. We used to sort of have that issue in the up and coming days of SDC where, you know, we were just trying to be really fast, and we'd have guys who were like, I'll do it, but I'm only coming out for like one practice. And like, sure, okay, they do it, but their transitions are awful, and you're not going to win if that's the case. You know, you need to be out there like every weekend practicing and getting to know the hills adjacent to you if you're a pusher. Like,
it's a extremely weird sport, right? And you can't just like walk on and have every, you know, athletic skill be transitive to it, right? You have to like have encountered it before, because shoving a carbon fiber tube up and down a hill is not like a skill that most people are naturals at.
Or only turning right.
Yeah.
You turn right very well.
At some point, just want to make a left-hand turn. Just mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. I think Sherry was a little surprised when I emailed her, and I was like, no, yeah, we all know who you are. Some of these names over the years just sort of end up in the history books, and they're part of the mythos, I guess.
Well, probably more infamous than famous.
This is an independent sport now. You paved the way. Another good question here from the audience for anyone interested, and this kind of goes perfectly with our duct tape fueled sport. Fueled? I guess held together by duct tape. Anyway, what is your proudest MacGyver moment in buggy? Anyone has sort of, Jake, do you know who MacGyver is? Or are you too young? Okay.
Yeah, there was a reboot. There's a MacGyver reboot currently.
Is there really?
They made a new one. Yeah, can you believe that? I mean, there should be, but.
Yeah.
But I know the reference.
That really old movie, Empire Strikes Back.
I think I've heard of it.
I'll tell you my least favorite MacGyver moment, which was terrible, but I think it was pretty good, which was we were trying to figure out how to heat the wheels at some point, and we took a rapid prototyping approach to this, in the sense that we failed a lot of different ways. One of the ways that we failed was we were like, oh, the wheels like won't get any hotter than, you know, the boiling point of water if we just make a radiator. So I spent like half of a spring break flexing together a radiator that I made with my hands, and that was powered by a drill. And then we decided to use antifreeze because it wouldn't get above a certain temperature, which melted the drill, and you know, there was 200-degree antifreeze all over the truck. So that was probably the worst MacGyver moment that we had.
Like, what could possibly go wrong? And like, literally, there are 200-degree antifreeze everywhere.
You know,
that's exactly what could go wrong.
This is one of those things where like you have this like flow chart of decisions, and like when you make it to the point where like there's 200-degree antifreeze like flying all over your truck powered by a cordless drill or a corded drill, you just like should reevaluate several steps up on that flow chart. You should just make an earlier decision differently.
Well, I can offer a worst MacGyver moment also. I think it was 78. We had a new buggy frame. We needed a body for it, and this is when ATO built the garbage bag buggy. The body was essentially a balsa wood frame with garbage bag plastic over it. The buggy was actually much faster without the body on than when we put the garbage bag body on it. So that was one of those learnings in design.
Was it composite by that point?
No, this was just, so back then the mainstream were fiberglass still, vacuum mold fiberglass. Some people had aluminum shells, and we tried this, which is basically balsa wood and heat shrink plastic sheet over a balsa wood frame, but we didn't execute very well on the concept.
Yeah.
Well, going on the duct tape theme, it was race day, and I think we raced later in the day, and I was jogging with John Woldrich, one of my push team, and we were talking just to work off some nerves, and I sprained my ankle quite badly. Like by the evening, my ankle was like the size of a grapefruit, and I wasn't quite sure whether it would work on the brake. So my feet were duct taped to the brake because there were two pedals, and so I needed my left leg to work for my right leg. Another safety feature.
It's not a bug, it's a feature.
I've definitely done some creative things to get things done. At one point last year, I had a plastic fork with 2 prongs taken out became like my most useful tool for one very specific task.
We had a it had to be like truck weekend, I think 2018, and one of our buggies was like a roll away from qualifying, and we thought we were sitting pretty and doing just fine. And on the penultimate roll, the steering locks up, and as she's coming up the back hills, and she's like, something's wrong, and my other 2 mechanics are, they pull her out and they flip the buggy over, and they're like, this truck is like way too confined, and they take it out. And this is another example of a lack of secrecy. They just take it out in the middle of the street during truck weekend and pull the hatch off and start trying to tinker with the steering for the entire world to see. And I'm still trying to, plan and get the rest of our buggies up and around the course when our rolls come around. And at some point they just decide, okay, well, we're going to put another washer in there, and then we're just going to bang on it. And, for whatever reason, the steering loosened up and the buggy got qualified, but it really came down to the very last roll.
Percussive maintenance, right?
Exactly.
All right, so we're just about running out of time. So I sent you guys a crazy question to finish with. I'm gonna want your answers in 1 sentence or less. Normally, if this were race day, we'd be doing this at Design Comp and making predictions for the following day, but because it is Buggy 100 and because there are no races today, my question is, what is your big prediction for race day 2120, Buggy 200, 100 years out? What do we got?
2120?
The buggy course becomes an obstacle course, and buggies are going backwards.
Nice.
This is my prediction.
I predict that the city of Pittsburgh will put down fresh new pavement, and it'll be smooth as glass before the race.
Never gonna happen.
It was supposed to happen this year. Oh, we were so close. I'd say that's a tough one. Give me another minute to figure that one out.
I'm gonna go with human drivers, but robotic pushers.
I was thinking, what role might airfoils play in turning buggies into pseudo gliders for part of the course?
Yeah, 3 points of contact. They don't have to be load bearing. They just have to be, right?
Yeah, just follow the course.
Yeah.
I'd probably have to go with artificial intelligence for head judges.
No comment. Cool. Oh, McHugh, do you have one?
No, I was just going to say the head judge is the best position. I mean, it's, at that point, like the mechanics will be perfect and it will be like very easy to make like a perfect buggy. I'm not as optimistic that the roads will be repaved, but it's going to be pushers, and the superhero undergrads of 2120 are going to be dropping the 130 mark is my prediction.
Well, it's sure going to be exciting. So thank you all for joining me here in this panel discussion. I'll hopefully see you guys next year at Race Day. McHugh, I know you'll be sitting right next to me at the panel because we can't.
Oh yeah.
But I think we'll send it back to the broadcast team right now after what do we have here? A 1-minute package of buggy bloopers. All right, so thanks again.